Hello and welcome to Undercommon Taste. This is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs.
Vive la Revolution.
I'm Ian Woodworth. I'm joined by my co-host James Daly, and today we are taking advantage of the season. This episode will be coming out the Wednesday before the 4th of July, which is American Independence Day. I don't know how many international listeners we have, but it is our Independence Day, and it's kind of a big one. It's a big anniversary.
Yeah.
We're not that old by European standards, but the United States is turning 250 years old this year, so...
This is like when your toddler hits 10 years old, it's big for them.
But yeah, so we're going to be talking a little bit today about... I wanted to talk about, as a sort of a world-building thing, revolutions.
Yeah.
Apropos of nothing.
Celebrate the birth of your nation by blowing up a small piece of it.
Indeed. I mean, we do it every year. It's just that the small piece of it happens to be up in the air and random people's fingers.
Well, let's couple fingers amongst friends.
If you do it wrong, they will truly be amongst friends. But yeah, it's a topic that I feel that a lot of times there are games that are the lead up to a revolution. Sometimes they culminate in a revolution, a campaign will.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're coming in the aftermath of a revolution and trying to stabilize things. That one's less common a trope, but like overthrowing a corrupt government, that is a pretty standard trope for the basis for a D&D campaign.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted us to have a conversation talking about different ways to do it that might freshen it up a little bit.
Okay. And with this, I have ideas of my own of like how this would interact and run. And I do like this idea for a concept because it is not strictly D&D dependent. You really can run this with just about any system for obvious reasons because we're working story. But even depending on how you play, I mean, obviously with revolutions, you are going to have theoretically points of conflict. And so you do have that combat representation that, the combat simulation that D&D is known for. But I think if done well, running a revolution, quote, quote, running or enacting a revolution should lean much, much heavier on roleplay.
I agree. And that also very easily segues, unbeknownst to you, into a question that I had for you, based on current events or recent events in the gaming space that I've heard several people chime in on this. I wanted us to get a chance to talk about it a little bit. There is apparently been some controversy over the last couple of weeks about Brennan Lee Mulligan and Critical Role.
Okay.
Because there was an instance in a recent episode where the players they did an exceptional job role-playing. And so he let them succeed without having to roll any dice.
Okay.
He made the executive decision, like, you role-played well enough, you just go ahead and succeed. You don't have to roll for it.
Ooh, okay.
And that has gotten so many grumpy people's panties in a twist that he had the audacity to let them automatically succeed without rolling dice.
Mm.
And so I wanted us to have a moment to talk about that and to flesh out our opinions, to make our opinions known on this.
Okay. So my opinion on this, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it is written within the D&D. I believe it's
in the player's handbook, yes.
Handbook, yeah, that DM fiat is DM fiat, and the DM is basically God, and if DM wants to do it, that's how it goes.
Well, I believe that the terminology that is used in the 5th edition and the 5.5 player's handbook is the Dungeon Master will call for a roll when they deem it appropriate.
Yes.
Which automatically, in and of itself, by its wording, signifies that there are going to be instances where the Dungeon Master doesn't need to call for a roll because there is no uncertainty about your success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at times too, if you role play, if the characters are on point and they are role playing exceptionally well, that's exactly what you want out of your table. If they are role playing well enough that they have knowingly or unknowingly advance the story in a direction that perhaps you weren't planning or that you were planning and you weren't sure how to kind of guide or lead them to that. That kind of immersion, that is the peak of exactly what you want your characters to be doing at the table. And so, yeah, I think having them, you did that exceptionally well. Yeah, that absolutely it succeeds because if they give a soliloquy or a speech, or if the bard sings the perfect song and they do it in character at the table, there's really nothing more you could want as a DM
Right.
unless you wanted it to fail. And whether you're doing something like giving inspiration dice or giving advantage, I mean, that's basically the same thing as, hey, you role played really well. Here's a likelihood that you're going to succeed. So if you go above and beyond that, then the DM just saying, yeah, you get it. Good job. I've got no issue with it.
I also have no issue with it because, these are tabletop role playing games.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not playing TTCSGs. We're not playing tabletop combat simulator games.
Right.
If
And we have
you,
some of those.
if you want to do that, go play Warhammer.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually painting an army now, so yes.
Right. Right. But that's the sort of thing, go play miniatures wargaming if you're wanting to do that. Or,
Yeah.
there are ways to play that you can just do that if you're wanting to do it as an arena simulator where you're just going into an arena and fighting the things.
Yeah.
That's fine. If that's the game that you want to play, then all more power to you.
Right.
But you don't get to say that you have to roll dice, that everything should have a chance to fail, is inherently untrue.
Yes.
And I feel like it is disingenuous to the gaming community to insist on that. And it shows a level of ignorance of the material that you have this mentality that there has to be a die roll attached to every single thing you do.
Yes. And I will say, I've not seen this kerfluffle or the people, but I will say almost certainly with like 99.999% certainty that the people that were upset about the automatic pass or the automatic grant of whatever this role could have or should have been, I'm guessing they did not sit down at the table during zero session. And they did not discuss saying, I want every die roll to have to be rolled. And this is something that should be brought up during zero sessions. Now, again, there's a huge fan base. A lot of people watch. A lot of people get invested or overly invested sometimes with some things. Some people just like to gripe. But
these complaints commonly came from the sort of people who are also complaining about the performative aspect of the actual plays themselves, talking about how these are performers and not players.
Yeah.
And I think that is also disingenuous. I mean, because they are sitting down and playing a game. Yes, they're good at role playing. They are professional actors and voice actors as their day jobs. They have the skills to do that. And just because they're good at it does not discount the fact that they are playing the game.
Exactly, yeah. But what I was getting at is this type of thing of whether something should be rolled to fail or not, or if this is absolutely something that should have been discussed, or you could discuss during a zero session. And I am sure, less certain on this that the people that are complaining weren't at zero session, but I'm sure that something like this has been brought up.
Well, I mean, the people that were complaining are just people on the internet. They're not part of this game.
Yeah, exactly.
They're part of the audience.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They weren't at the zero session, so they don't know what rules exactly have been agreed to or not. There's a fun German term I've heard on TikTok within the past week or so that's really, really, really funny, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, and if it's not, it needs to be. But as a German insult, that sounds like the behavior of someone without a hobby or no hobby behavior. I'm like, basically, they have nothing better to do than complain or cause a kerfuffle. Or I'm like, yeah, you don't have a hobby, do you? Or their hobby is causing kerfuffles.
These are. I was going to say something, and I'm going to intentionally not. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to make gross overgeneralizations.
Fair.
I don't want to assign aspects to these people not knowing who they are.
Fair. That was a good wisdom.
Yeah, I have those sometimes.
But you didn't roll that wisdom check, so I want you to roll that dice and tell me what it comes up.
Okay, fine. Just give me a second. That's a nat 20, actually. So yes. So another quick thing before we get into talking about our subject for the episode in earnest. I mentioned this a little bit at the end of last episode, but I wanted to bring it up again. Coming up in September, our episode on Terrascmus on September 9th is going to be our 6th anniversary episode.
Huzzah.
And then the episode immediately following that one is going to be our episode 200.
Nice.
And so we are going to be having some past guests return to the show, and we're going to be doing a one-shot. It should be a one-shot. It may end up getting split up into a two-shot. I don't know yet. We haven't played yet. But again, I just wanted to bring that up. We are still deciding on a game. I think it's going to end up being Raccoon Sky Pirates.
That really looked fun. I was kind of like, okay, this will be fun. Am I DMing that one still?
I have to buy the game. It might be GM-less. I don't know. I haven't actually looked at it yet. It's just that ever since I saw Sam Lee's review of it on her TikTok channel, I wanted it.
Fair.
And it's $8 on itch. And it looks great. You are raccoons that want to go to the suburbs to get better trash because you live in a junkyard. And so you build a skyship from the junk in your junkyard, and one night you decide to fly out to the suburbs in search of better trash.
Chaotic steampunk trash pandas.
And all of the chaos that ensues.
I love it.
And so I'm hesitant to disclose who the players are going to be yet.
Hold up on that one.
Because we haven't recorded. Once we've recorded, I'll tell everybody who all's in the game. But one player was super excited about it. One player had it on their to-play list.
Excellent.
And the third was like, this looks like fun, but you're going to have to teach me how to play it. And like, I think we're all going to have to learn how to play it. I don't think any of us have played it yet.
It'll fit the theme of the game perfectly because chaotic trash panda.
Yes.
I love it.
And so that is going to be happening in September for our anniversary and our episode 200.
Perfect.
Or episode 200. We're still figuring that part out. Okay.
Revolutions.
So, Vive la Revolution.
It was that or me singing Les Mis, and I figured most of our listeners would prefer if I did not sing unfiltered and unpracticed upon the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's only so much I can do with editing.
Yes.
I am not a sound engineer. But
anyway. Jim, I'm a doctor, not a magician.
Okay. So, given that we owe our upcoming holiday to that world's greatest exporter of Independence Days, I think that we need to talk about the conditions that lead up to a revolution and the different ways a revolution can happen.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously the first and most obvious option would be that there is an occupying force. The locals rise up and overthrow the occupying force.
Okay. Yes, I could see that now. I don't think that would be the primary. I mean, it is a primary way.
That is the most common one of these.
Okay.
They frequently end in failure.
Yes.
That is something to keep in mind, that this sort of grassroots rising up against your oppressors sort of revolutions, they often end in failure.
Yeah. Now, again, too, thinking about an occupying force, I generally think of necessarily like a foreign occupying force. So depending on how you want to define or play that could be fine. But yeah, generally there is going to be, I mean, even I was thinking about breaking it down even smaller. I mean, there's going to be a distinction between the haves and the have-nots. And again, you can get into political philosophy, whether you want to get into, divine right versus, inalienable rights type things with Locke, or if you want to get, like I said, to Marx, the have and the have-nots, or if there is a long-standing, traditional family and they feel they have might makes right type thing. So those are all, I suppose, occupying forces if they are ruling with military strength? ?
Well, not even necessarily just military. I mean, in modern day America, we are in a place where the ruling powers have economic power.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not necessarily military. We don't have troops on the streets enforcing curfews and such yet.
Yeah.
Can you tell we're real optimistic about the future?
Yeah, until that economic, system gets shaken up a little bit, and then they would to protect the economic because that's the lifeblood of our current system and a lot of systems. And so, even that within there is if you're looking for what is your economic spark, it could be that something has happened. Someone has discovered something, maybe a new mine, maybe a new resource of some sort, or a resource has been tapped out, but something has disrupted the local economy. And now greater powers that be are stepping in to clamp down, and the people are like, nope, that's a bridge too far.
Yeah, a very common inciting incident for things like this are taxes.
Yes.
And generally, these are taxes that are raised because the controlling entity is involved in something expensive somewhere else.
Yeah. So, I mean, and again, from an American perspective, that's very much what it was. It was the British trying to pay for it. And it wasn't even somewhere else. It was quite literally paying for the French Indian War here in the States. And they had to pay to send troops over, and they incurred quite a debt. And they said, well, it was a war to keep your stuff safe, so you're paying for it, right? Right? Wink, wink. And we're like, no, you're the empire. So yeah, and again, it could be that a resource elsewhere has been threatened, or that, a border's been defended, and maybe it's not just taxes, maybe it's a conscription levy, and people are like, well, we don't want to fight your war overseas or over the mountain or wherever it is, because we're here happy and safe. If we're going to fight, we're going to fight you instead.
I mean, that was the whole impetus behind the War of 1812.
Yeah.
It was a war that the United States declared on Britain because they were capturing American vessels and press ganging American soldiers into service in the British Navy.
Right.
At least that was the predominant declared reason.
Well, that and general piracy as well, but yes. But yeah, so for these, again, the most common is going to be an established government of some sort, and the people are going to rise up to otherwise dispose of said government, or at least outright defy that government and that government's reaction to it. And again, that can be, like we said, that can be political, that can be economic. A good example of a rebellion kind of fomenting and being brought up to a trigger point is if you've watched Full Metal Alchemist, either Brotherhood or the original, they both kind of build up, but you have that kind of building of tension. V for Vendetta kind of follows the same way, where you have that conflict and that abrasion of forceful power of enacting and enforcing laws, and then at some point someone snaps and a innocent, generally a child, is killed, and that's enough to definitely push people over the edge to take action as well. So these are the kind of things that get people to rally up and behind, is a sense of injustice in one form or another. And this is what's going to cause people to rally to push and move a government.
Yeah. So this would be your Boston Massacre.
Yes.
This would, as the inciting incident that was heavily propagandized, but it was the inciting incident to rally the colonies against the British in the American Revolution. And, that is something that you can have rebellious movements, but without an inciting incident that is going to activate a large portion of the population, they're not going to get any traction, and they are going to be crushed.
Yeah.
Because if you have an entity that is unpopular enough to trigger a revolution, they are going to be in a position where they are going to use as much force as they can bring to bear to put down that revolution, to send the message to prevent further revolution attempts.
Absolutely. And so I think the question generally for the DM and the players, and again, this tends to be a zero session question, and a question for Ian as well. With something like this, do you use the players' past experience and kind of build that tension up and lead into the revolution, or do you kind of drop them in the tinderbox kind of ready to go? A good example of kind of that early slow, not even really a slow build up, but that early build up is if you look at episode 1 of Star Trek, The Phantom Menace.
Star Wars,
yes. Oh my God. Yeah, Star Wars, blarg.
Boy, you really are
Yeah.
in prime form tonight.
I really am. But yeah, so Star Wars, again, you have the tension was there. Everything was kind of set up and ready to go. And most of Phantom Menace is the main characters, in the case the player characters, kind of there building up to that greater rebellion. Now, again, they do have a spoilers for a 25-year-old movie at this point, 26-year-old movie. There is a war on the planet Naboo that is instigated, but that itself does not lead to the greater rebellion. But the incidents from that lead up to it. So do you start your players and let their actions kind of build and foment that tensions within their world? Or do you just drop them in, hey, here's a rebellion, it started yesterday, this is what's going on, here's your story and history behind everything?
Yeah, and that is another thing to keep in mind because, the American Revolution would have been a very different story if it had only been Massachusetts that had tried to do it. The Minutemen managed to drive back the British at, Lexington and Concord and get some very key early victories against the British. And that got thrown into this giant propaganda machine that was able to unite the other colonies in a unified front against the British. But if, say, it had only been New England, like if it had only been, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont, if it had only been that cluster of colonies up in the north, if New York hadn't joined with them, if New York had stayed loyal to the British, the revolution would have gone very poorly.
Oh yeah, it just would have been smooshed.
Yeah, because, New York was a rather populous colony. Pennsylvania was a populous colony. Virginia. These were all very heavily populated colonies. And if they had not joined in and decided to back Massachusetts and the New England colonies in this rebellion, then the British would have just sent 20,000 troops across the ocean, and a bunch of militiamen from the middle colonies and the southern colonies would have just marched north, and they would have just put an end to it.
Right.
So yet you have to have that nugget, that one touchstone that can unite all of the disparate forces to a common goal.
Yeah. But what I was asking is, for your players, do you think it's better to have the players kind of build up with that with their actions? So maybe they are envoys or actually from the originating government at this point, kind of like Star Wars, where the Jedi were from the Empire until the point of revolution? Or should they just start, hey, here's a revolution, here's a little bit of backstory, you're in here, let's go?
Right. So the Jedi were always independent, and at that point in the story, it was the Republic and not the Empire.
Yeah.
They had not, Palpatine had not consolidated power yet.
Yes, but I see them they were independent loosely, but they largely represented the Republic at that point and the government forces.
Right. I think that would depend on the type of story you're trying to tell.
Okay.
Honestly. And I think that would be something where you would really need to have the players understand how their character is going to be approaching this situation. Whether they are an oppressed native, whether they are a disgruntled colonizer, whether they are the child of the governor, whether they are a soldier in the occupying army.
Yeah.
These are all very different characters with very different perspectives.
Absolutely.
And they're going to have very different reasons why they would decide to rebel against the occupying force.
Yeah.
And I think that having them think about that before you start playing, have them think about that as they are building their characters, that is something that really needs to happen on a character by character basis. They need to explain why they have skin in the game. Because if the character doesn't have skin in the game, that is not an appropriate character for this game setting.
No, I get that 1,000%. And I think that is character backgrounds, unfortunately, I think are overlooked a lot of times, especially in a D&D setting. You've got that whole background option, and most people just close their eyes and pick something to fill in a couple extra proficiencies, and that's about it.
You pick the background that gives you the proficiencies that you want.
Right. But
that's how 5e works.
Yeah, but you don't actually consider what the background means or what it means for your character. And I think that is where a lot, especially new players, tend to fumble. But I've seen background falter and fall flat in many different types of games too, because it's not, people want just what's directly in front of them, but they don't think to consider what's actually created their character within world or within game, not just my character is created by me throwing some math rocks on a paper.
Yeah, and you could just as easily have the homegrown radical just wanting to kick out the occupiers. They don't even have to be radical. They can just have this sense of patriotism for the place where they are from.
Yeah.
And they know that the people in charge are not from here. And so there is a tribalism or a nationalism surrounding that. You can have that character, and then you also can have characters, you mentioned Les Mis earlier.
Yeah.
Talking about these libertines they're deciding that they're going to do a revolution because, this would be the grand bon vivant thing to do. This would be an exciting experience.
Right.
And then the cannons get rolled out, and then they see what it is that they've actually signed up for.
It's not a party anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And they're suddenly realizing that they're in way over their head.
I think that's an experience too. Now, again, talking about revolutions, it was an attempted revolution within the United States, but the Civil War. And you have, I think it was the Battle of Manassas. It was or Antietam was the first one, correct?
No, Manassas/Bull Run was the first.
Yes.
Battle.
Yeah. Okay.
After Fort Sumter. Yeah.
Fort Sumter, but that was the first actual pitched battle. And there are stories that, hey, they're going to do a war, so let's pull up our horses and our wagons, and we'll sit on the hillside and we'll watch them do their thing.
Yeah,
because
people came out and had a picnic.
Yeah, because in European, especially with the type of warfare that was prevalent at the time or before in the past, it was you'd watch a cavalry charge, you'd go, there might be a bayonet rush, but it wasn't overwhelmingly bad. Generally, the battles were kind of short and quick, and they were decided, and that was it. And this was a bloodbath of a battle, and people were trying because, hey, let's go watch a war, and they got full view of the war, unfortunately. But yeah, that thing of, hey, we're going to go have fun on both sides, young men joined up saying, hey, we're going to do a thing and we'll get a couple, dollars and we'll get some glory, and it's not going to be that big of a thing. And then they get shot in the leg by a lead musket ball and they're having a leg amputated, and it becomes a very, very different event quickly.
Right. And, talking about Manassas, the big reason why all of these people came out to picnic it was because they thought that the Union Army was a shoo-in to win.
Yeah.
They thought they were going to show up, they're going to have this big display of force, they're going to, fire a couple of volleys, and, Johnny Reb was just going to turn around and run away, break ranks and leave, and that the war would be over. And then these Southern troops proceeded to wipe the floor with the Union Army.
Yeah.
And then all of these people who had come out to watch the battle further complicated things and led to further Union catastrophe because they saw that the battle was turning, and so they all got in their carts and tried to return to D.C., and that clogged up all the roads.
Right.
And so the Union Army couldn't maneuver because all of these civilians were in the way.
And those are absolutely things you can put into your campaign or your scenarios. Yeah, having people panic and bar the streets if the army's trying to retreat or maneuver is absolutely a thing that could happen. I think a big thing to remember is if you are playing a revolution type game, if it's not a one-off, if it's a campaign or an overtelling series arc, this is going to be more role play than actual combat for your characters. Even at most people, looking at reality, generally those that fight are only 3 to 5% of the population, and the rest of it's how the civilian population reacts to everything. Are they going to be supporting? Are they going to be against it? Are they going to be afraid? Are they going to be enamored and full of spirit? How do you know your person, your party member, your player characters? Are they talking to moles or spies? I do like referencing material. I'm sure Ian's read one of these. I don't know if he's read both, but 2 books if you want to think about how the people around a revolution would react. Tale of Two Cities and The Moon's a Harsh Mistress are both great revolutionary books. Another thing that we bring up from time to time that generally focuses on combat, but could be a good thing for the people, would be a morale check. Obviously, we've talked about before in the past, and I don't know which episode it was, but how willing, a random NPC is going to be to talk to your character to start with, whether they're friendly or hostile or whatever. But if they think they're in danger or something's going, Have they closed up shop and fled early? Is the town deserted because people think catastrophe's coming, or is it full because they think that's a safe bastion that won't go? So like people is going to flood a walled capital city, but they're going to flee a village that's kind of near the front. And so what kind of resources are available for your player characters that they go through? Have looters come through, or maybe they're doing something like a Russian scorched earth during Napoleon's invasion, where your party's going through and everything is burnt to the ground because they've taken whatever they could carry and they don't want to leave anything for an invading force behind.
Yeah. So these are the sorts of games that you're really going to have to keep track of factions.
Yes, absolutely. Factions are going to be huge.
And so games like Blades in the Dark and other Forge in the Dark games that have faction reputation trackers built in as part of the game's mechanics would be a good fit for these sorts of revolution games. Blades in the Dark is not explicitly a game about revolution, I don't think, but it is very commonly used for that purpose.
Yeah.
Because one of the most common causes of revolutions collapsing is factionalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
You end up having too many chefs in the kitchen, and you end up having the coalition break apart as egos start clashing with one another. And then you start having infighting between the different revolutionary groups, which takes the heat off of the main enemy, and they're more easily able to deal with individual cells of revolutionaries without having to fight against a unified front.
Who was the other general slash gladiator that rebelled with Spartacus? I mean, that is, I can't, for the life of me, I can't remember his name. Yeah, that is a great example of a rebellion that had everything behind it. They could have gone, and then they split. There was another leader, so Spartacus took his chunk. This other guy, for the life of me, I can't remember, took his chunk. The other part got captured, so Spartacus kind of wheeled around, trying to come back and rescue some, and then was cut off, and then tried to go. And that wishy-washy, because personality split the forces, the whole thing faltered and everyone gets crucified because welcome to Rome. But yeah, no, that's a great example of a rebellion failing because of factionalism.
Yeah. So I think we have pretty well talked this one through.
Yeah?
I
was going to say, if we're talking scenarios or setups, I think something like a kids on bikes even, I think, could be a lot of fun as well. And again, you wouldn't necessarily be kids on bikes in combat, but traditionally kids were used to run supplies and or secret messages because no one's going to suspect the kids, right? You have that again through the Revolutionary War, through World War I, through World War II, through many. And I think that could be an exciting game scenario to run, is you're carrying, a message for the revolution or maybe some packet of material or supply, and you have to get through the occupying forces system of government or people or blockades or roadblocks, and you have to talk and role play your way through all of that to get where you're going. And you're not necessarily doing combat, but you're still within that revolution kind of theme or feel.
Yeah, that would make a pretty good one-shot game, I think.
Yeah.
If you're a group of kids that have to get this very important message from one group of revolutionaries to another group of revolutionaries on the other side of town, and you have to go through the enemy occupied sections of town in order to get there and not get caught and make sure that the message survives and makes it all the way.
Right.
Yeah, I think we've talked this one through pretty well.
Yeah.
The next category of revolutions that readily comes to mind is the coup d'etat.
Okay.
This is where a faction within the government, usually the military, decides that the politicians in control are doing a pretty crappy job, and so they decide to take over the government themselves. And because they are the military, they are the militant might of the government, they are able to just do that.
Yeah.
Because there is no force to stop them from doing it.
To quote Pompey, again, referencing Roman history, but don't talk to me about laws when we carry swords.
And to go back and quote V for Vendetta, what do you think happens when a bunch of people without guns stand up to people with guns?
Yes, exactly. And I think if you're doing a coup d'etat, I think this one is kind of more set for you want to throw your players right into the action. I think this one, there's generally less buildup and strife for a coup d'etat. Generally, it's we don't like who's running things or someone's paying us a whole lot more, and we're going to either install this puppet into power or we're taking it for ourselves. There's generally less, I guess, population foment. This is more kind of that spur of the moment, or I've got an advantage, so I'm going to push it type scenario.
And quite often, a coup coincides with civil unrest. There is usually a mandate from the masses initially.
Yeah.
Like, there is civil unrest, there are people protesting in the streets, and then there is a high-ranking military leader who decides to take advantage of that unrest and, under the guise of populism, usurp power and dismantle the current government. And very often, almost exclusively, I think there are a small handful, and none of them explicitly are coming to mind at the moment, but there are a small handful of instances where a military coup resulted ultimately in a peaceful transfer of power back to a civilian government.
Right. I think, too, if you're running a long-term story and you want a coup, I think running especially your factions and having that military or local government faction, but generally it's going to be a military faction, but having one of those factions come up, and that could be a great twist to throw at your players. Like, everything's going well, you're sitting there, they're making progress, and suddenly the general or the captain of the guard, whatever, says, I've got all the swords, I've got all the bows, I'm king. And now how's your party going to respond to that?
And I think an interesting way to do that, to sort of have this revelation moment, would be to have this high-ranking military official be their primary quest giver.
Okay, yeah.
For like 8 to 10 levels.
Okay.
Like, this is somebody, the party started off doing odd jobs for a city watch.
Okay.
And then as they established themselves as people who were competent, they move up. And so by the time they hit level 4 to 5, that transition from tier 1 to tier 2 play, they're getting in contact with this general or their immediate lieutenant, and they're starting to do jobs directly for the leadership of this branch of the military or this mercenary force or what have you. Just this powerful militant organization within your setting.
Yeah.
And then they keep doing all of these jobs, and they keep succeeding at all of these jobs. And the general who is in charge of all of this is, very pleased with their progress and very happy with how they're able to do all of these jobs that they have. And if the party isn't asking any questions about it, if they're just like, well, this guy is...
He's throwing coin and we're getting stuff. Yeah, we're getting loot and gear.
We have no reason to distrust his motives. I mean, he is a general. He is a high-ranking military official. He is trusted by the leadership of this country. Everything we're doing seems to be in line with his desire to maintain the peace and to, further national security.
Right. Then he tells you to kill a dragon, and the dragon's name is the king.
And then ultimately, once it gets to a certain point, he goes and makes his move, because now he is under the impression that he has built up a sufficient rapport with the adventurers that they are his ace in the hole.
Yeah.
They are his problem solvers. They are the ones that he will be able to use to snuff out the opposition whenever he establishes himself as the ruler.
Right. Yeah, no, I think especially if you're running a long campaign, that is a great fork for world building. Is once that happens, does your party back the general, or do they refuse and go down a different path? And that party choice should affect the world long term that they play in.
Yeah, especially if during all of this time, not the general, but the people around the general are dropping these little hints and subtle suggestions that are highlighting the incompetence of the current rulers.
Yes.
So not only are you being successful and helping secure the nation and you're doing all of these good things for this general, providing stability and security and all of these other good things. And the general is clearly being demonstrated as being someone who wants stability and security for all of the people that he is in charge of. So the party ends up building completely on their own that the general has this sort of moral high ground almost.
Right.
And not just moral high ground, but an aptitude high ground.
Yeah.
He is capable. He is compassionate. He has the greater interest at heart. He is almost this selfless leader purely based off of what the people around him are feeding the PCs as the campaign progresses.
Right, yeah.
Because the general is going to surround himself with a whole bunch of people who also buy into his ideology. And quite often, the core lieutenants surrounding a leader like this are going to be far more zealous than the leader is.
Well, again, at this point, you're kind of describing Palpatine again to a T, which is great. And I think...
Which was a coup.
Yeah, it absolutely was. One of the tropes or one of the things in stories and in literature I love, and it's harder to pull off long-term in a campaign, but that idea of an unreliable narrator. And I think it's very easy for players to kind of get into the mindset that whoever's talking to them or interacting with them, unless they're dressed up like they look like Skeletor and they've got a lich face and a goat staff and all these other, that they're being truthful and they're honest. And so, yeah, you would have this charismatic leader and the people around them are going to be selling them a bill of goods. And so maybe things aren't quite as bad as they are projecting or they're telling that the PCs and players are fixing. I mean, there could be some underlying problem, but they're definitely building up. And at the point that your BBEG tends to make his move, the players come to the realization that what they thought the world was doesn't actually match reality, and they have to go through and re-examine everything they've been told and learned about the world or their area up to that point as well.
And reevaluate their role in all of that.
Yeah, their roles and their allegiances and what bridges they've burned and who they may have helped or hurt on the process along the way. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that was a fun one. So the next one on my list is what I'm calling hostile takeover. So this is where another outside entity comes in and displaces the current leadership.
Okay.
So this would be basically like the colonial wars, where you have one colonizing faction that has moved in and set up a colony, and then they're at war with another faction, and they end up coming in and occupying that territory.
I like this. I'm going to dial this down smaller. I'm going to go more of a microcosm. This would be great for something like, what is it? It's Cyberpunk. Is it Shadowrun?
Yeah, Shadowrun is a cyberpunk fantasy.
Yeah, so doing something like Shadowrun, and this is within a corporation, and it's a corporate takeover.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely,
or even something like Old Gods of Appalachia, and you've got the company, whatever the company is, coming in and taking over. Or maybe you have something like the TVA coming in and taking over, and then causing whatever reactions from that as well. I think when we think revolution, it's easy to think government. I think that's where most of our minds go. But again, you can dial this down smaller and more intimate real easily as well. And depending on your game type, it can work. So like something like a corporate takeover, corporate espionage, something along those lines, I think works.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, this would even work for, gang wars.
Yeah. Yeah. Well done.
Yeah,
good call.
Yeah, this would be gang turf wars.
Yeah.
I recently read Jade City.
Okay.
The first book of the Greenbone Saga. And there are different families that control different portions of the city. And you have your allegiances and you have loyal clans that swear loyalty to the greater clans. And there's that factionalism going on.
This would be perfect for something like VTM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, any of the World of Darkness games, like,
yeah.
Werewolf the Apocalypse would work for that too.
Yes.
A little bit less because Werewolf tends to be a little more rural. Okay. While Vampire tends to be a little more urban just because of the nature of werewolves versus vampires. But yeah, I mean, the World of Darkness games would be a good vehicle for that. Cyberpunk, was it Cyberpunk Red?
Yeah, maybe. I'm
I'm
thinking of the
trying.
project which does Cyberpunk 2077.
I'm trying to remember which one, whether Red or 2077 is the video game, because the other one is the
2077 is the video game, but it's made by Project Red.
Then Cyberpunk Red is the newer version of the TTRPG, because it was originally Cyberpunk 2020.
Okay.
So again, there's lots of Cyberpunk games
out there. Cyberpunk really, really kind of goes well with this more takeover type than an outright, like a homegrown revolution. This is definitely more of a...
Yeah, this is definitely a top tier opposition.
Yeah, this is going to a lot more subtlety, a lot more espionage, a lot more distraction deflection type thing, less combat generally.
Yeah, where a revolution is a bottom-up sort of deal, and a coup is a lateral at the top, but from within. A hostile takeover is a lateral from the top, but from without.
Yes.
This is two or more separate factions going at one another.
Yeah.
Okay. And because we're running low on time, the last one that I have, I didn't really have a good name for this sort of thing. So I just called it in my notes, Yeetus Deletus.
I love that. That's so much fun. That'd be a great name for a one-shot, just the Yeetus Deletus.
So this would be one of those where, for whatever reason, the people in charge just decide to pull up stakes and leave.
Okay.
This has happened at times as a peaceful transition of power where imperial forces have, granted independence to a former colony. But this would also be a thing where the occupying force is, again, they're at war with somebody else half a world away, and they just really need those troops. And this colony it's too far out of the way. It's not worth maintaining a claim on. And so they just, pack all their troops onto a transport and leave.
I would call this technically, I love the Yeetus Deletus name, and again, that is a great title for anything. This is a classical power vacuum.
Yeah, I think power vacuum, that actually is an excellent term to use for this.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if you want to explore how this would work, or some of the situations, again, Machiavelli, the Prince, kind of goes into some of this, talking about power vacuum and how people could try to take advantage or exploit or suffer from other people exploiting that, because someone's got to step in. So why not me? And why not me is you and 12 other people. And so definitely this, again, lots and lots of factions with this one. Whether someone's got more might, or someone's just a good charismatic leader, or someone has control of a strategic resource or defensible position. But yeah, I'm thinking too, you have if there's some sort of larger conflict going on and your government just pulls up stakes and leaves because they are leaving for a more defensible position. But yeah, whatever could cause that power vacuum, and then how do you deal with it when all authority goes away and you start with just literal pure governmental anarchy?
Yeah, historically, the best example of this is the collapse of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Because you had this central governing authority, this imperial governing authority that, following the sack of Rome, and was it 641, 643, when the Visigoths showed up, where that structure just disappeared almost overnight.
It just vanished.
I mean, you saw a very similar thing with the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I was going to say that one.
And then you end up having the factionalism come out again, because you end up, each region is going to have their individual strongman. The one person that has, whether it's the charisma or the military might, or just the loudest voice.
Yeah.
The ability to rally the people around him to establish themselves as this local tyrant, for lack of a better term. And then from there, you end up having people warring with their neighbors to try and establish, dominance one over the other. And you have all of these little tiny fiefdoms popping up.
Honestly, even beyond that, talked about the fall of the Roman Empire, but even before the fall, you have the suicide of Nero, or any number of times when the emperor suddenly died without an heir. And that happened frequently. Most of your European, a lot of the king dies and he has no heir. Oh crap. Alexander the Great, another great example of that,
Yeah.
Yeah, I leave my ring to the strongest. Thanks, douche. Who's the strongest? I mean, at that point, it seems like he was intentionally trying to cause problems. But yeah, all of that just that no one knows who's in charge, so everyone's in charge.
Right. And, you saw that for a very long time in Germany. I mean, Germany ended up at one point, it was like 128 individual principalities.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't until Otto von Bismarck in like 1865, I think it was.
Was it the Franco-Prussian War?
It was either 61 or 65, managed to unite all of the principalities of Germany into Prussia.
Right, yeah.
Into the German Republic.
Yeah.
I can't remember because Germany and Italy both formed nationally around that time.
Italy was 1856, I believe.
No. I think Italy was 65 and Germany was 61.
Okay.
I know this because the state of West Virginia is older than the nation of Italy.
Yes, that is correct.
And West Virginia was from 1863.
Okay. I could have had my number slipped. So yeah, 65 might be correct then.
Correction. While editing, I remembered the correct date and I have looked it up and confirmed it. The unification of Germany by the efforts of Otto von Bismarck under Kaiser Wilhelm I occurred in 1871, not 1861.
Yeah, that was one of the classes that I had during my history undergrad degree, was Medieval Origins of the Modern State.
Okay.
And
that'd be fun.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was the one my advisor was teaching. And we talked about Italy for like 3 weeks with that. And, all of the
Italian states.
we also talked about states that should have succeeded, that should have been established as modern states, that should still be around, like the Kingdom of Sicily and the Kingdom of Burgundy. Those are two European states. They were around for centuries that just ended up getting subsumed by their neighbors, despite the fact that they were among the strongest states for a very long time in their particular geographic areas.
Yeah, I've heard familial, like with the Kingdom of Sicily, that a lot of things were promised, and when it came down to it, because I believe it came down to an actual vote, and there may have been some ballot box stuffing. And again, that this is fragmented history from family members that spoke English fragmented at best anyway. But yeah, I know there was a lot of spite about Sicily becoming part of the Italian state.
Well, anyway, we've been at this for a good long while. I think we had some pretty good points and a decent conversation on this.
Yeah, no, I think if you want to, there are a lot of options to run a form of revolution for, either a one-off or a campaign setting. I think this goes really, really well for a campaign setting. And I think, as we brought up, things for the DM and the players to consider is why for the revolution. And just remember that this is going to be a very role-play heavy style of game. Yes, there will be combat involved because most revolutions are going to have some form of combat, but primarily factions, role-playing, doing things behind the scenes are probably going to carry a lot more weight than those few battle times where you're throwing math rocks.
Yeah. And if you have a group of players that doesn't want to do, all of that role play, all of the conniving and conspiring and what have you, just have the party be the fixers for the face of the revolution.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are the people that the people in charge send out to fix the things that they need fixed.
Yeah.
And so that way, they can still have their murder hobo tendencies and progress this storyline. And in that, you can still temper their murder hobo tendencies, because if there's a lot of collateral damage, it's going to look real bad on the revolution.
Exactly, yeah.
If they're killing innocents, it's going to look real bad for the revolution.
Do this, but do it subtly.
Yeah, you're wanting them to do surgical strikes to take out leadership targets. You don't want them to blow up an entire barracks full of soldiers.
Unless they're doing specific sabotage to make a statement, which could be sometimes too, but generally, yes. Yeah. Generally, you want it subtle.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the line that the revolution has to toe to A, show that they're powerful enough to actually succeed against the occupying power, while B, being on the side of the civilians, being on the side of the populace, and being able to maintain that balance where they are the people's champion.
Yes, plausible deniability is gold.
So they need to have that ability. And so if the party is not careful in the way that they are carrying out their duties, it's very likely that they're going to lose their support within the revolution. And now suddenly they are persona non grata in both sides.
Yes.
And that is a very dangerous place to be.
Yes, you don't want to be there. That bad spot.
That is bad. But anyway, thank you everyone for listening. If you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, send us an email, undercommontaste@gmail.com, or come join us on our Discord. You can find a link to our Discord through our website, undercommontaste.com. You can also find a link there to our itch page, undercommontaste.itch.io, where you can pick up our liminal horror adventure Beneath the Lake or my solo RPG Forever Home.
If you'd enjoyed this, we're glad you joined us as well. We enjoyed our episode. If you want to find our other episodes talking about world building, deep dives, or interviews with other game creators, search Under Common Taste on your podcatcher of choice.
I think next time we're going to be going back and talking a little bit more about post-apocalyptia. I realized that the last episode got a little bit info dumpy.
That'll happen.
Yeah. But next episode, we're going to be talking about some of the skills, some of the skill resolution, some of the other elements of character creation, some of the other mechanics surrounding character creation, primarily surrounding experience points and leveling and all of that. And so some of the more interesting things about character creation, aside from the mechanical aspects of, these are the things that make character go vroom.
Yeah, good deal.
So thank you, everyone, again. Stay safe. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Happy gaming.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Under Common Taste. Our theme song is Massacre Ann, written and performed by Mary Kroll and used with permission. You can find Mary online at marykroll.bandcamp.com or on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Mary C. Kroll. Our logo is by David Sutherland. You can find more of David's work on deviantart.com/David Sutherland or on Instagram.com/Willex_73. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so stay safe, and we'll see you then.